everybody, and happy Wednesday. Oh my gosh, what a day it has already been. We are running a little bit late, but that's okay. We're here. We're doing this because I don't know if you are prepared for today's conversation. But before we even introduce our guest, before we even go there, Ra, welcome to Real Talk with Emma, G and Ra. This is mental health. What mental health sounds like. These are real conversations facilitated by yours truly and Rawinia Judson, all about having real dirty conversations, getting into the nitty gritty about people's zones of genius, how they have thrived even in the face of chaos, and specifically how they have managed to foster mental health and resilience in these weird times that we call life. My name is Emma G. Like I said, I'm super excited to be here. Ra, talk to me. What's going on, babes?
Kia ora. Hello, everyone. I'm excited for this convo. We were chatting prior to jumping on live, and I know that Leslie is going to share so much incredible wisdom and insight. So yeah, I'm really ready to just dive right in. But thank you, everyone, for joining today.
Yes, Leslie Morgan Steiner, how are you, my love? How you're in the East Coast right now. It's so good to see you. I haven't seen you for a year and a half now.
So good to see you both, and so wonderful to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So I was telling Ra before we jumped on today, you and I met because we had the opportunity and privilege to speak at a women's event a few years ago. And I'm still relatively new to the world of speaking, but music has always been my kind of love language and things. And then when you got up and shared your story of your book and your the messages you talk about in your TED talk, I kind of felt punched in the gut a little bit because it's so hard for women, I think specifically, to feel okay about having the conversations that you have with people and shining light on those kind of scary spaces that we kind of avoid in life. Can you tell us a little bit more about your story, about how you got involved in going from the experiences you've had to actually now speaking out and advocating for women against violence, basically?
Yes. So I think it's just my nature that even as a little girl, I was very interested in telling the truth about what I saw around me. And my platform over my lifetime has just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, fortunately. But I've always been the same. When I was a little girl growing up, I talked very openly about the fact that my mother was an alcoholic, and there was a crazy household that I grew up in, a loving but also nutty household. And I went on to college, and I was anorexic when I went to college, and I wrote my first article for 17 magazine about being anorexic. So I've always just been really into telling the truth about how complicated it is to be a woman, how it's simultaneously more wonderful and more complex than anybody wants to admit. Mm-hmm. And then when I was in my 20s, working at 17, I met a man who I really fell in love with. He was my dream partner, brilliant, funny, adored me. And he also had been terribly abused as a small child. And I married him. I didn't see any red flags, and he began abusing me 5 days before our wedding. He was a very violent and disturbed person, even though he was also a great person. And he had guns, and he strangled me. So he held loaded guns to my head and strangled me many, many times. And he could have killed me at any moment. And it took a long time to leave him. And when I did leave him, there was a time period where I couldn't speak about it, not because I was ashamed, but just because I was traumatized. Mm. And then eventually I wrote a book about it, Crazy Love, and I did a TED talk about it. And I began a career where I speak out to conferences and through the media about this reality. And I've written other books about other realities of women's lives. Mommy Wars was about juggling work and family. The Baby Chase was about surrogacy. And then I most recently wrote a book called The Naked Truth about getting divorced for the second time at 49 and starting to date again, and how much fun that has been, and how wonderful it is to be a woman aging, which is a message that we just don't frankly hear very much.
Gosh, what a story. And also like how terrifying it would have been to be in that experience that you navigated. And I think those stories are the things a lot of women don't necessarily talk about. So I love that you're speaking about it openly now, after that period of not being able to. I'm really curious because you mentioned like telling the truth is something that's really natural to you. So what's kind of come as a result of you being open about your lived experience as a woman? Like what have you noticed in that vulnerability and like the community that perhaps you've created? What has that allowed people to experience?
Well, the thing that I love the most about it is that by being honest about my own trauma, I'm able to connect with millions of other people about their own trauma and how it has made them stronger. And not everybody wants to speak out about the worst things that have happened to us. But I have found that women in particular are very good at speaking out. And I think that men, unfortunately, are not as good. And I think it's one reason why we see such a crisis among men's mental health right now, is that their silence keeps them very sick. And so speaking out has made me healthier and stronger. And it's also led to great connection with people who've read Crazy Love or my other books, or people who've watched my TED Talk on why victims don't leave. And I find that everywhere I go, I have really deep connections with people who would otherwise be strangers. And for me, that's a wonderful part of being human and in being a writer and a truth teller, is that I get to connect with other human beings on such a very profound, transformational level.
I can attest to that 110%. I love that you have these conversations, because for me personally, when I first met you, I was not long out of a really unhealthy and abusive relationship, to the point where I was attacked in Canada, shall we say, and ultimately had to get a restraining order and move house and do all the fun things that unfortunately we have to do as we try to understand how to navigate life after abuse. But then, obviously you came to my Hensto, bridal shower, whatever you guys call it in America. And so, I've found the space of being able to move on from the trauma into the healing. And so being able to talk to you about your journey from also trauma to healing and now dating again, I'm just really inspired by that. I think, it's such a weird space that, again, we don't talk enough about, especially as we get older. I was saying before that I had a panic attack on my 30th birthday. Okay, only 30, calm down. But, but at the end of the day, there's such a taboo about aging for women, and then being able to feel like we're worthy of love as we get older, as we find those gray hairs, as we sort of, collect all of the life experiences that we experience. And I want to, can you speak to that at all? Like, how do you find the confidence? Who led that torch for you?
That's a great question. And before I answer it, I just want to say that when we first met, within seconds, Emma G, I knew that you were also a truth teller and that you were incredibly brave. And I could just sense it right away. And it was really powerful. And it's why you and I are friends from that one chance meeting, why we have such a strong bond and connection.
Yeah.
And I love that about being a human, but I particularly love it about being a woman. And I just feel like in general, we don't get enough real messages about what is the truth of being female. And I personally feel like life is not survivable for me without other women. Romance, breakups, marriage, childbirth, raising kids, dating, getting older, learning to be financially independent, all of this they're subjects that our society in general, any society, doesn't really care very much about in terms of women, because they are deemed to be not the most important parts of that life. Like, I think that in the male view, and I'm really grossly simplifying here, that like war and making money and dominating women are the important subjects. And it doesn't leave much space for women's stories And I've always felt this. I was always fascinated by my mother and her struggles, and why I wasn't learning more about what it was like to be a woman on the face of this earth, because my mother's life was vastly more interesting than my father's. And I just thought, what, is everybody crazy that they're not talking about this? And so I decided to talk about it. It's not even that I decided, I didn't have a choice. It's just the way that I am. And I think that I had a lot of support in my mom, even though my mother, maybe because my mother was so flawed. You know, she was the hero of my life until 5 o'clock every day. And then she got drunk, and then she was the villain of my life. So I always had a very real view of what it was like to be a woman. And my mother loved me so much and believed that I could do anything. And I could tell you 20 stories of crazy times that she believed in me when no one else did. And I think that has given me a lot of strength. And I just believe it's important to be my own friend. It's what's gotten me through. I believe in myself. And I can't talk enough about how much fun it is being a woman, especially as you get older, because what tends to happen, you get a lot of more experience, and most women I know become more and more and more confident the older they get. As long as they're able to say, to heck with all that, all the societal messages. It's about how we're not valuable after we turn 30. And that's probably why you had your panic attack at 30, is that you had these messages that you're supposed to get everything, all these things done by then. Yeah. It's just not true. And although I have more wrinkles and gray hair now, I am so much more comfortable in my body and in myself. There is a wisdom that is priceless that comes as you get older. And I just want to shout it from the rooftops that you and everybody out there listening who is younger than I am, I'm 59, about to turn 60. So basically everybody, you have such a incredible treat coming to you as you get older, and you learn to just listen to yourself and to other women and not to anybody else.
Oh my gosh, I loved so much in what you shared then, like especially about like surrounding yourself with other women and that being like a really important part of your journey. But even speaking about like the realities of what it is to be in relationship with your mother, right? Like that kind of, what's the word that I'm looking for? Juxtaposition between the two, right? And actually getting to learn from that experience. I know that we spoke about this off air, but as I was saying to you earlier, it's like in my 30s, like life just keeps getting better and better. And what we were speaking about was like, I thought my 30s was going to be like this downhill slide, because that's what you hear from a lot of other women. Like my 20s, I wish I was younger. I wish I was skinnier. I wish I looked like I used to. And like you're saying, I feel so much more confident in who I am as a woman, like the way that I show up, the way that I lead, because of the relationships that I have with other women, but just also that acceptance of self, I think that comes from, as you're talking about, that wisdom as we age. I'm really curious to hear, like, what have been some of the things, like, as you have, like, matured and gotten older, that you wish people spoke about more, that would have, like, helped you perhaps, like, when you were a little bit younger, navigating womanhood?
I like this question, Ra.
It's a great question. I just attended a 22-year-old's college graduation. It's a girl who I've known her entire life. She's my daughter's best friend, and she also is the daughter of one of my best friends from childhood. And, you know, I gave her champagne as a graduation present, but then the real present was that I answered the question that you just asked. Mm-hmm. I took her aside. I said, look, my real gift for you is that at least once a week, I want you to say to yourself, to heck with all that, to heck with all the conventional wisdom about relationships, about work, about what I'm supposed to do, what I'm supposed to eat, what I'm supposed to exercise, what I'm supposed to wear. I want you to just at least once a week say, forget it, I'm doing what I want. And when I look back at pictures of myself when I was her age, and my hair was so beautiful, and my butt was more beautiful, and my face was more beautiful, I would not trade what I have now for all of that. Because what I see is a woman then who was afraid, who felt like she had to be a good girl and she had to follow society's rules. And society's rules are not made for women, they're made for men. And they're particularly made for white men. And so we should not follow them because they're not for us, they're not our rules. And the best decisions I've ever made have been the ones where I said, no, I'm not taking that job. I'm taking a different job. Yes, I am going to send my book proposal to one other person. Yes, I am going to get divorced, not just from my abusive first husband, but from my second husband as well, because it wasn't bringing me any joy or happiness in my life. And to just take a risk and say, I'm going to do this. And then the other thing that I did that has brought me so much wonderful self-esteem is that when I got divorced for the second time at 49, so 10 years ago, I started dating like crazy. And I dated so many men at once, which is against the script, right? You know, a good girl only dates one man at once. And I just want to say I'm super heterosexual. I'm like on the spectrum of sexuality. I'm far in the heterosexual zone, but this applies to anybody, no matter what your gender or your preference. I said, I am going to date men who love me, and I don't care anything else about them. I don't care how old they are. I don't care how much money they have. I don't care if they're going to be a good provider or anything. And I had the time of my life because I discovered that there are really a lot of very wonderful men out there who appreciate older women, who appreciate women, period. And I wasn't going to just wait at home for whatever man was going to come find me, which is what I had been told my whole life, including by my wonderful mother, that I should never chase a man, that I should never chase my dreams, that I should just wait and see what comes to me. And it's a terrible, terrible way to live. So my advice to my younger self and to all of you is go for it. And there's a caveat here, though, that people don't talk about it much. In order to go for it in your life, you have to be economically independent. And you cannot rely on somebody else for that. And so I invested a lot in my education, starting when I was very young, and in my financial freedom. And as a result, I'm able to say, to hell with all that. But it is purely because I'm economically independent. And you cannot overinvest in your education, your career, your financial freedom. And there are a lot of ways to do that. But it's something that women don't talk enough about among ourselves, is how incredibly vital that is to long-term happiness.
I like so many things in there.
The first thing that comes to mind. So I want to sort of touch base on your the point you made about being more free when it comes to taking ownership of your body, your sexuality, etc. Because culturally speaking, coming from New Zealand, where the dating life is very Americanized to a point, like very heavily influenced. New Zealand's very heavily influenced by America, but also very heavily influenced by England. Obviously, we are under the British rule technically, but that I think one of the biggest brain farts I had moving to America was the difference in approaches that women in New Zealand have dating compared to women in America. Because I think a lot of women in America, it's almost like you're expected, to your point, expected to be the good girl, be, sort of hands down, smile, look pretty. It's not so much like that in New Zealand. And I think that's been one of the most weird things for me as I learned how to navigate life in America. Obviously, I being, in my 30s now as well, I was almost like, well, to hell with that, to your point. I'm going to do what I want to do. And now I'm married. So I guess that worked out. But, but I'm curious. The thing that I really am, I hate the word curious now. I think that's like the best word for every dude bro out there these days. But I really want to know a little bit more about your perspective when it comes to navigating relationshiping for, like, apart from being economically independent, relationshiping over the decades how that has evolved for you, and how, like, what does fulfillment look like for you? What does, what's the end goal? Is there an end goal? Is the joy really in the journey? Is, like, what, because I think a lot of the time for women in particular, because we're told we need to act this way or do this thing, or, put everybody else's needs ahead of ours, we forget to feed our own cup, and sort of live the life that at our core makes us happy, as opposed to making everyone else happy first.
It's a really great point, Emma, because I think we are raised to, all women in really every culture. And I could dissect British culture versus, Saudi Arabian culture versus Afghanistan, or, New Zealand. It's all, every country has in common is that society rests on women being caretakers and nurturers and compliant sexual partners. And some of that is very rewarding, depending on your personality and what you want to do in your life. But it's really important, along with all of that, to say, I matter too. And one of the gifts of my abusive first marriage is that I really saw that loving that man, who I did really love, that he was going to kill me if I continued loving him and putting him first. And the reason I'm alive today is because I said, no, I'm going to put myself first. And it was, I was only 26 when that came to me. So I've gotten to live my life since then, knowing that I had to put myself first. And I haven't always done it perfectly. And I raised my kids as a very devoted and selfless mom. And I have no regrets about that. That was wonderful. But I also tried to fit into a very tight little perfect wife box. And that cost me so, so deeply. And I think it is important to say that we matter too. And it's really hard. And as I'm heading into my 60th birthday, I compare myself a lot to my female friends who are of the same age, or the people I went to high school or college or business school with. And what I see is this cliched sandwich generation, but it's really real, that most women, whether you work or not outside the home, you're sandwiched between taking care of your kids and taking care of your parents and taking care of your partner. And it's just a lot of taking care of. And I don't see it leading to happiness for any woman out there. I think that most of the women I know who are older are really burdened by that. And the women I know who are really happy are the ones who, like me, raised our kids to be really independent. My kids, I could die tomorrow and my kids would be sad, but their lives would not change at all, because that's how independent they are. And also, I got sort of lucky. This is a terrible thing to say, but I got lucky that both of my parents died very peacefully. My mother at 75 and my dad 2 years ago at 90. So I don't have parents to worry about or take care of. And I'm so free because of it. And that's a great gift. And I think no matter what your station is in life, you can take a look at your life and say, am I also putting myself first? And are there ways that I can continue to love the people in my life and care for them, but also do more for myself?
Mm-hmm. I really love that question, like, given that connection is such an important part of life, right? Because it's like, it's a challenge for a lot of people and women. Like, actually, how do I put myself first? Like, actually, how do I approach this way of living where I do matter and I'm pursuing my goals, my dreams, my happiness, what's important to me, whilst still being in relationship with the people that I love, right? What's been your experience in kind of like navigating that space between like still putting yourself first, as well as still, having really fulfilling friendships, like pursuing, dating, your relationships with like everyone around you? Like, how do you personally navigate that?
Well, I think it's an inside job, if you will. It takes place in between our ears and our own mind. The first thing that you have to realize is that other people are not paying quite as much attention to you as you might think.
So true. So true.
They're not like, they don't have like a clipboard where they're like checking off, you know, did she make me breakfast today? Did she make the best breakfast ever? Did she empty the dishwasher? Did she, you know, all of those things? Nobody's really paying attention. And everybody, we're all focused on ourselves. It's just part of being human. And I think when I realized that, I felt a lot freer to say, okay, I am going to do this. I'm going to, like, one of the funny things about me is that I don't eat lunch. I hate lunch. So what I do when if I'm in a group and people are eating lunch, I go for a run or a hike, or I do a nap, or I go do something on my own then. And I think there've been a couple of times when I've done it and people have looked at me like I had 6 heads, like, you're not sitting with us? I'm like, no, I'm going to go do this. And they just don't care. Or you know what? If they do care, I don't really want them in my life, because I don't want anybody who puts pressure on me to be like that. I want to be with people who take care of themselves and who let me take care of myself. A lot of freedom there. But you have to get out of this idea that women are put on this earth to please other people. We're not. We're, depending on your religious, spiritual views, we're put on this earth to enjoy life, to please ourselves, to serve God, to serve the universe. We're not put on earth to please our partners or even our parents or our children. We're just not. It never works out that way. And the happiest people ever are the ones who are comfortable with being quote unquote selfish. It's not selfish. It's just saying, hey, I matter too. And nobody can read my mind, and I've got to do me, and I've got to take care of myself. And Emma G, that's what I saw in you when we first met. That's what I responded to, is that you're an incredibly vibrant woman, and that you have that figured out, whether you knew it at 30 or not. You do have it figured out. And Ra, I don't know you as well, but I trust that the reason you're here is that you're on that same journey too.
It's true.
Yeah. Everything that you're saying, I'm like, I learned in really similar situations. I was in an unhealthy relationship where, I put my relationship first. I didn't consider myself. So a lot of the stories that you're sharing, and even what Emma is sharing, has been my experience as well. And choosing myself has been the best thing that I've ever done. And that's also coming from someone who's Maori. So I'm Maori, indigenous to New Zealand. And our culture is very much about putting other people first in community. And so there has been so much tension and friction within my relationships and my family around being perceived as selfish, and being selfish for pursuing all of these things that I have, like writing my own book, You Are Not Alone, and the implications of that around how my family see me. And so, everything that you're saying, I'm like, there's been so much truth in that for myself. And I think these are the conversations that are really important to be having. So I'm just so happy to have you here sharing all of that.
I couldn't agree more. Well, it's funny because, even though Ra's Maori, I'm Fijian, still growing up in New Zealand and whatever, the to your point, Ra, I think it's a Pacifica thing. There's so much emphasis on family first, on putting everyone else before you. And as you were talking, Leslie, about, the guilty sort of gratitude that you have for no longer having to care for your parents. I don't know if you're aware of this, but my single, I had a single come out in March called Grieve, which is about grieving the loss of my mother. Even though she's still alive, she, cut me off a year before we got married because in her mind she has no positive addition to my existence in these days. And it's still taking me a long time to kind of process that. Obviously, songwriting is helping, which is one of the reasons why my book's coming out soon. But I think that cognitive reframe of recognizing that in the grief, there is a gift. And you've mentioned that several times
Yeah,
in our
I love that.
conversation. And
gift.
that's why when you talked about, you know, the blessing of what your first husband taught you, and you might have seen me sort of chuckle a little bit. That wasn't me chuckling at the abuse, obviously. It was me chuckling at, like, of course you would see the blessing in that, because that is the power of women. I think that's the power of having that awareness, having that knowledge, having that the ability to focus on, you know, how where the yum is in somebody else's yuck, or whether the treasure is in someone else's trash, or in our trash. You know, I think that's a really beautiful thing, and I just, you are an absolute testament to strength and to resilience, and to, I'm so excited for this book of yours. I'm so excited for your wisdom. I'm so excited for, we didn't even get time to talk about the conference that you presented at.
Well, you know, I'm always happy to come back for a round 2. And I think...
No, don't tease me with a good time.
Everyone is a teacher, right?
Yeah.
Everyone who we encounter. And it's up to us if we listen to what they're trying to teach us, or what the universe is trying to teach us. And the only thing that we control in life really is how we see the world. And we have so much more control over how we see the world than we are led to believe. And I also think it's really important to understand that we are going to disappoint everybody in our lives, and everybody in our lives is going to disappoint us. It's just part of the human condition. And women in particular, men also in different ways. You know, I don't want to say that women have it so hard and men have it so easy, because that's not true. Every human has their challenge. But we don't have to be perfect in order to be loved. And I feel like that is one of the things that my mom taught me. By being so imperfect, I couldn't have loved her more. I loved her imperfections. I loved her craziness. I loved the times that she did nutty things as a mom that now just make me laugh, that she probably would have been ashamed of at the time. And it's a wonderful thing to say that we're all really lovable, even when we're not perfect, and even as we age, and even as we get wrinkles and cellulite and, you know, all of those other things, we're really lovable. And it's just a really important message for everyone to understand. Hopefully, you know, in your first family, that your family teaches you that. But if not, you can still teach it to yourself as you grow older.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We could talk for hours and hours and hours, and I can't wait for you to be back in DC so I can show you my new home and my new studio and actually catch up in person. Obviously, we'll have to kidnap Ra from Canada so that she can join the party. But we
road trip.
Yeah.
Yes, I'd love that.
We do have to go, unfortunately, but obviously we can keep in touch with you at Leslie Books on all social media, as well as lesliemorgansteiner.com, I believe it is.
It's lesliebooks.com now. That website is migrated, but you can put in either one. And I love to communicate with people through social media and through email and through my website. So anybody, if this resonates with you, please reach out. And thank you both so much. This was really a wonderful, very inspirational conversation.
Yeah, we really appreciate everything that you shared. That there are so many golden nuggets in there that I'm sure whoever's listening will get so much out of. So yeah, thank you so much. It's been so nice to meet you.
Yes.
Likewise.
I love it. And for everybody else, be good, be kind. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Real Talk with Emma G and Ra. Mental health sounds like this. This was a fantastic conversation with the boss woman of all bosses, Leslie Morgan Steiner. Until next week, friends, be good, be kind, spread love like it's going out of fashion. And I don't know, don't forget to brush your teeth or something.